Mr. Hamill has joined us live from Ballyclare, and we hope you find this evening really beneficial. I suppose we started with this 2 years ago, and the rationale for moving on is basically how far technology has moved on, and we wanted then to do a follow-up. So we've called this Putting Planning into Practice in a Pastoral Way, part 2. So the evening is going to be made up of 3 distinct parts: planning and how to help and support your son or daughter in their planning for their studies, the actual practice of studying effectively, which Mr. Hamill will look after, and then the last part, and most importantly really, which is the driving force behind this, is the pastoral element, how we look after our young people as they navigate what is a pretty challenging time for them in terms of not only their internal mock exams, but as they go forward into their external public exams. So I'm going to lead the way with the planning part. I'll then hand over to Mr. Hamill, who will take you through the practice of effective study, and then Mrs. Hannah, Pastoral Vice Principal, will take you through how we try to look after and support our young people in what is a challenging time. So this, I suppose, this might be what you and I would perceive to be studying at home. Over the last few weeks, I've had the joy of trying to take my Year 9 boy through his preparations for his own internal exams, and they finish tomorrow. And I just want to assure you that that is most certainly not the scene in the McCallum household, nor has it been over the last few weeks. I would suggest that that's probably a little closer to it. I could have been a little bit more, I suppose, imaginative with the picture, but yeah, a lot of it seemed to be me stressing over the books, whilst he was pretty passive in the background and generally, as you'll probably imagine, glued to some sort of a device. So I have walked that walk, and that has led us to where we are this evening. So I suppose I thought I would start with the straightforward stuff. How do we support our young people at home? I have a son of 12 and I have twin girls who are 10, and it's a noisy place, our house, and it's a very challenging place to get peace and quiet for him to study. So the environment that we create is crucial, and it's not always possible. So I would encourage you to encourage your son or daughter to take advantage of our Boost club, which is a quiet space after school for an hour. If they don't have a quiet environment at home, you know, we have the study booths here, we've access to ICT, and it's supervised, and that's from 3:40 to 4:40, Monday to Thursday. So it's important that we try and get them somewhere quiet to work, somewhere that's well lit, and a nice temperature, not too hot, not too cold. Maybe get the window open to allow a little bit of airflow in so that there's plenty of oxygen coming in. We obviously need oxygen to the brain in order to study properly. The next one's the hard one, trying to create a distraction-free environment. So my own son was revising over the weekend, and he was in his room, and I took his phone off him, and I called in to have a look to see how he was getting on after 10 or 15 minutes. And he made a sort of knee-jerk reaction to hide something underneath his thigh. And when I went in and checked underneath his thigh, of course, it was his Apple Watch. So whilst I'd taken his phone off him, he was still somehow distracted by his Apple Watch. So the bottom line is we've got to try and create a distraction-free environment. You know, get the mobile phones away completely. Don't allow them to have any notifications because they just ping incessantly. Try and block social media. And again, today, Matthew was home alone on a study day, and I did threaten to bring the power lead of his PlayStation with me, and then I reneged on that. But again, the distraction of a PlayStation is something that certainly a boy of 12 or 13, the draw of that is very difficult, as is the television. So trying to create a space which is distraction-free. Then providing them with the correct resources to be able to study effectively with, and Mr. Hamill will build on this later on. So of course, plenty of paper, blank paper, lined paper, that they allow them to make revision notes that obviously need their own notes, their own textbooks, and if possible, you know, there are some excellent revision guides out there. You know, we would hope that their notebooks and their own notes are up to date. I personally went to Tesco and bought quite a significant number of record cards. They're not expensive, they're flashcards. And I know we're going to talk about electronic versions of them later on as well. I just think that getting Matthew to sit down and write the answers and then the prompts to that is a very effective way of challenging that working memory. Then obviously lots of different coloured pens. Dare I say it, I'm sorry if I'm generalising here, but boys particularly, we like to be able to visualize our notes. When you look at boys' notes, it's generally a big block of one coloured writing, no spaces, no highlighting, no underlining. We try to make sure that the notes are well spaced out, highlighting key points, key terms, key terminology, and using different coloured inks so that it's easier to visualise if they're struggling to recall it. And then we'll talk a wee bit about technology, laptops, mobile phones later on. They can be a source of wonderful good, and they can be a source of significant bad. I was at a course recently where we talked about artificial intelligence as being wondrous, or potentially ruinous. So that's the easy part. I suppose, forgive me, there's going to be lots of analogies with regards to driving tonight. And so I want to start with knowing the road ahead. As a dad myself, I sat down with all of Matthew's notes and his booklets, and I tried to find out what he had to know and the journey he had to travel, and it was quite challenging. We have worked quite hard in school to try and provide you with that information, and we've updated that even earlier on today. So if you go onto our school website, it has everything that you will need to know to support you, to support your young person at home. So you go onto the school website, lurgancollege.co.uk, and when you click on the academic subsection at the top of the page, it will bring down a little area that gives you curriculum and departments. And if you go into the department section, all of the departments in the school are listed there. So if you click on one of those, that will take you to a subject page. Within the subject page, you'll not be surprised to know, as a former PE teacher, that I chose the PE subject page. You'll see that there is a little drop-down menu, for example, for GCSE or for A-level. And there's a little red link there where it says pupils study the SEA specification. When you click on that red link, that link will take you to the specification for that subject. And it will look a little bit like this. And when you go into the subject specification, that will give you all of the detail of everything that your son or daughter is going to be studying in that particular subject. And it looks a little bit like that. So I know certainly in PE, they will have covered the respiratory system over the course of the year to date. It's one of the earlier topics that are covered. That's quite difficult. That's quite high-powered and highfalutin. So what we've done this year to try and make life a little bit easier, when you go into the parents section, there's examination information, and you'll note if you go in this evening, the internal mock examination timetable is now uploaded, and there is also a section for revision lists. So it looks a little bit like that. That is the internal exams timetable that has been uploaded to the website today. And then to support you with that, we also have this. We have a number of sections. There's revision lists for year 11 right through to year 14. So I've chosen business studies, and you can see there are 13 topics that the pupils in year 11 will need to study for their internal mock exams at the end of January. And if you hold on to that thought, I'm going to come back to that shortly. So in terms of knowing the road ahead, everything you need to know, whether it be the detail of the subject specification or whether it be the revision lists and the internal exam schedules, it is all for you on the school website. We have a supporting learning at home page for parents. So when you click on supporting learning at home, it's going to bring you to a range of resources. And one of the resources is a template lesson planner, or sorry, a template revision planner, and it looks exactly like what I have on the screen. If you're old-fashioned and you're a traditionalist, by all means, that is available for you to download and to fill in manually. 2 years ago, I was advocating that strongly. Today, I hope to show you something that will be more personal to you and your son or daughter, more malleable, more flexible, and it's going to be using artificial intelligence. So suppose I did a presentation to pupils last week in assembly, and that original template is the equivalent of the old paper map. I played golf last weekend with a friend of mine in Donegal, and we laughed when we got in his car because he had an old paper map of the road maps of Ireland in the back, and we all laughed at him and said, who in their right mind ever would use a paper map anymore? And that got me thinking about, well, Google Maps takes us to Donegal. It tells us exactly how long it will take us to get there. It tells us exactly how far it is, and it takes us step by step, turn by turn to our destination. And if you're stressful, if you find that stressful like me and you need to be on time, it certainly does reduce anxiety. So what I'm going to show tonight is basically an educational Google map as to how we could sit down and properly help our young people plan their revision between potentially now and the start of their internal exams. And I'm going to take you through that just now. And we do it using artificial intelligence. So the first thing we want to do is to set our destination. And basically, that will be what your son or daughter hopes to get in their exams. And then we've got to find our starting point. And our starting point involves us having, at A level, going through the syllabus that I just showed you, the specification for each subject, and then conducting what we call is a RAG analysis of all the topics. Now, to go back to we have revision lists for our mock exams that are now posted on our website, and all of the topics are in those revision lists. So you don't necessarily have to go to specification. If you go to the revision list and you get down the topics for the subjects that your son or daughter is revising, you can RAG them. And a RAG analysis is basically highlighting in red, amber, or green. Red being this is a topic or a subject that I do not understand at all, and I'm going to need to spend a fair bit of time studying. Amber is, I sort of get it. I'm pretty comfortable with some aspects of it, but I make mistakes and I might need to look at it a little bit more closely. Green is, look, I'm super confident in this topic or in this subject. I get the questions right. I'm really confident in that, and I need to spend, not that much time focusing on that. So the goal of a revision timetable would be to try and turn our reds and our ambers into greens, and to do so in time for the start of the exams. So that's what it might look like if we were using the specification that I outlined earlier. Or as there is the year 14 chemistry revision module or revision list for the internal school exams. So it might be that lattice enthalpy I'm particularly strong at, but I really struggle with the rates of reaction and equilibrium. And I would go through those topics and I would RAG them. Bear with me, I hope it makes sense. So what we then have to do is plot our route. And what I love about artificial intelligence is that it allows us to create an effective but a deeply personal and a realistic study schedule for a young person. And the feedback we got from our pupils was really positive with regards to this. So what I have taken I've gone ahead and to come up with what I call the perfect prompt, what we put into AI. Now this is just a template, and this current template is based on an A-level student. It can, and I have another one that I'll show you later for a GCSE student. So we set the scene. We've got to tell AI what we're looking for. So we need it to be a highly organized A-level revision timetable expert. And in this instance, I need a 6-week schedule for subject A, B, and C. I need the schedule to prioritize these red topics, followed by amber and least time spent on green. And then you input your RAG data. Okay, the beauty of this then is that you and your young person can actually set the limitations. You can tell it how much you want to study, when you want to study, based around social life, based around other commitments, whether it be BB or church or drama or music or sport. You can actually determine the time limitations, and you can make this as detailed or as open as you so wish. And I'll show you that shortly. Then we obviously want to state that we want it to be the 25 minutes work, 15 minutes off type approach, and we want the output to be a week-by-week table, ensuring a good balance across the subjects. I don't trust AI, so it's really important that whatever it spits out, whatever it produces, that we double check. And then I'm going to show you how we can potentially reroute later on. This is what that might look like based on an A-level student in Lurgan College. It is a lot of information in there, but I just want you to imagine that template based around the strengths and weaknesses of your own son or daughter. So as you can see, I've brought all of that data, all of that information together, and I've said in this particular example, I want to work 90 minutes, Monday to Thursday between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. I want to spend 2 hours, I think, on a Sunday evening. I want to rest on Friday and Saturday. I want it to start today, and I want it to work right through to the 19th of January. However, I don't want to revise at all. We want our pupils, and I want to make it very clear on this call, we want our pupils to have a Christmas break and a Christmas holiday, which is why we have our exams at the end of January. So we don't want to work at all between the 20th of December and the 3rd of January. And I want to work for 25 minutes on. I've given it some examples that I would like it to use, etc., etc. I want the format to be a clear table. That is what that would look like for an A-level student. This is what it would look like for a GCSE student studying 10 subjects, and instead of going into the detail and the minutiae of the topics, I've basically done a RAG analysis on the subjects themselves. So I've RAG'd the subjects in general, and it's the exact same prompt. And you can chop and change this whichever way you like. The best laid plans always go wrong. Life's not perfect and things change. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take a bit of a risk, and I'm going to try and demonstrate this live. Wish me luck. And I'm going to show you not only what it can produce, but also how it can potentially very quickly and very easily reroute given the circumstances. So I'm going to escape out of the presentation, and like Blue Peter, that is, can everybody see? Hopefully you can see my Gemini. I have pre-populated, I have copied that A-level example into my Gemini. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on Go. And I'm going to show you what it produces in a pretty short space of time. I think in about 30 seconds, it will produce for me a 6-week schedule. There it is already. It's created a 6-week A-level revision schedule based on my analysis. So it's going to tell me exactly how many slots I'm doing per week. It's going to give me a breakdown of every subject. So 60% of the slots allocated are going to red areas, 30% to amber, and only 10% of the time associated with those topics that I think I'm very strong at. Then when I scroll down, it's going to tell me week 1, that's starting tonight, 2nd of December, I've got 2 slots. I've got to do quadratic functions, discriminant and roots for maths, followed by cell physiology for biology. That is laid out for me from today right the way through. There you are, you can see 20th of December to the 3rd of January, rest period, no revision at all. And then I can go through and study the whole way through to my exams. Now, that's wonderful, and it's a starter for 10. I would certainly want to go back over that, but I want to show you a little bit like when I'm driving to Donegal, we might come across a road accident or a roadworks, and it'll tell us that there's roadworks ahead. Do we want to reroute? So very often that is the case whenever we're studying. So say, for example, I have said there that enzymes, and let's have a look at, there's enzymes in biology or amber, and chemistry, structure and practice are amber. I'm going to just state here that I am making very good progress with biology and need to spend more time, I'm not even going to type it in correctly, more time on maths rather than enzymes practice. And when I slip that in, it's obviously going to completely, it'll go back, it'll reroute. There we are. That's fantastic news about your biology progress. Well done. Here's an updated schedule for weeks 2 to 5. And all of a sudden it has updated my schedule. Now, it's not going to happen in Lurgan College, I want to reassure you that. But say, for example, that I decide to be particularly devious and I'm going to bring the exams forward a week. So if I said I need to be ready for exams 1 week earlier, I haven't typed it correctly. Gemini will work that out for me. All of a sudden, it will rejig and reorganize my study schedule based on whatever parameters that I place in. It's maybe going to make a fool of me because I've mistyped earlier. But I suppose what I wanted to highlight tonight is that previously, 2 years ago, I showed some apps that exist out there. I showed some different sort of technology that could be used that would allow you to manually set up a revision timetable. There's a condensed 4-week A-level revision timetable because all of a sudden the exams will be moved forward. Maybe you're going away on holiday. Hopefully you're getting an idea of the power of artificial intelligence. And whilst I think it has dangers, and I know Mr. Hamill will touch on that, I think it has real power in making the lives of our young people much easier. And I can only speak to you from a dad's point of view. It was revolutionary in the McCallan household in terms of how we prepared Matthew for his winter exams. He seems to be doing better than he did previously. But as a dad, I found it wholly beneficial for me. It's taken the stress out of it, and he certainly has enjoyed the fact that he knew if he stuck to his timetable that he would reach his destination on time. Thankfully, we didn't have to reroute. That is the planning section done. I will be happy to answer any questions later on. I think what I'm going to do now, Mr. Hamill, is I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I will allow you to move on with how we can support our young people with the practice of effective learning. So I'll happily hand over to Mr. Hamill now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCallan. So I have turned on my camera here, so I'm hoping that it'll appear sometime soon. But we're going to pick up a little bit from where Miss McCallan has led us so far, and turning some of those practical ideas of planning into practice. But let's start off with a little bit of a quiz. Who am I? I have studied for GCSEs 3 times over the past few years, but I haven't sat one exam paper. Who am I? Well, no prizes for guessing. I am the parent of a teen. Just about. Have one teen left. I have nearly survived the teen years, and for those of you that are in the midst of it, I can tell you there isn't a light at the end of the tunnel. You can get through. But these years can be particularly challenging. And I hope tonight that what you're going to walk away with is a range of practical ideas and suggestions that can help you to at least have some of your sessions like that. As Mr. McConnell has already said, a lot of the sessions end up looking more like this, that they're stressful for everybody involved, that despite our best efforts to help, it ends up fraught, and you're managing a lot of the time anxiety. Anybody who has any connection with the school at all will tell you that anxiety levels are through the roof. They're like nothing that I've ever experienced in my nearly 3.5 decades in Lurgan College and across the system. And anxiety can, of course, be incredibly amplified by exams. So what is this an image of? This is an image of you approaching your teen's bedroom. In my case, sometimes it was in front of all the missing cups that have been disappearing around the house, or to see if they want some help with their revision. You open the door, you don't really quite know exactly what is going to see you on the other side. But I guess one of the things that I've heard a lot through my entire career as I've chatted to parents is something like this. And you folks that are along tonight, can we just thank you so much for turning up, because this sense of partnership that we have with Home and School is absolutely key. But the question that I hear and I've heard so many times is, Mr. Hamill, I know that they're working, I'm keen to help, but, they're working really, really hard. Why is it not producing the kinds of results that we might hope for? So if you're in that situation, this tonight is designed to help you. And I want to, Mr. McCallum's already been a little bit autobiographical. I'm going to do the same, because I'm kind of approaching this like he has or is tonight, partly as a teacher, partly as somebody this is my career, this is my job. But doing that job of teaching a class and helping my own teens to revise at home are not exactly the same. There are challenges here. And one of my own kids, this was the constant mantra. What if I can't? What if I don't? What if it doesn't? Just this lack of belief. This is manifesting in some of those levels of anxiety. And I just found myself saying this to them back again. What if I can't? But what if you can? What if I don't? But what if you do? Well, what if it doesn't? But what if it does? And I want to say just at the offset, before we get into the details of the mechanics of this, one of the biggest jobs I think we have as parents is helping our children, our teenagers, to believe whenever they don't have that belief themselves. So do you believe this? Is this the way it goes? Motivation leads to success. Well, for a very, very small minority of highly motivated, intrinsically driven people, perhaps. But the research is clear in this. In many cases, it's the other way around. It's success that leads to motivation. So you're here tonight because you want to help your child in their revision. The key, I think, to start before we get into the practicalities is what we're aiming for is success. If you can show them that it is possible, if you can show them that these methods we're about to look at can make a difference, that's key. So can I encourage you to look for those small wins? Look for those things that you can say to them when they say, what if I can't? But look, what if you can? You've done it. And it's that belief that follows the success is really what we're looking for. So what are the prompts, or what are the approaches that we can use that are going to help to revise? Well, we're going to start off with the old classic of the revision notes. For most young people, when they sit down to revise, this is where they're going to start. And we're going to absolutely affirm that this is a good thing to do. To give you a little bit of an idea of how to go about doing this, we want to get them to take their notes, their textbook, whatever resource they're using. What are the key ideas and how are they connected? Connecting the ideas is absolutely key for this, because that gives them the structure, the framework that's going to help everything to have a place, and the new content to fit into that. And from that, you're going to make your revision notes. Now, these slides that I'm about to show you that look like this, these kind of 5-step walkthroughs, they're all available on the website, so you can have a read through them in your own time. But if you want some guidance on how to sit down and produce revision notes, then this is a good place to start. And I certainly would suggest that young people, teenagers, struggle with summaries. They struggle to sort out the wood for the trees. They struggle to see what some of the key points are. So this is a really practical way that you can help them to begin with, to help to sit down with making some of the revision notes. And don't worry, there's going to be some tips coming in a few minutes about how AI can help you with that. But what we want to do is spend the bulk of our time here is what happens when you've made the revision notes. You've made the revision notes, what happens then? Well, one of the key things when you're trying to learn it, and again, this guidance is available on the website, is to break this down, link it into prior knowledge, break the whole into the different parts, link them all together, that kind of sequencing. Once you've made your revision notes, the part of the problem is that students very often will just sit passively reading over them. This is a little phrase that I like to use with my classes a lot. If you're not thinking, you're probably not learning. If you're not thinking, you're probably not learning. And if you have done all that work in producing those revision notes, and then you sit down and you passively flick over them and read over them, you're probably not thinking too much. So the rereading function here, this attempt to try and get the information into your head simply by reading, doesn't really work, which gives me a perfect excuse to show one of the favorite gifts that I use to try to get this into as much training as I possibly can. This is just the cutest little thing. Oh, if only revision was like that. Okay, I have never seen any one of my students do that, but I've seen them, hoping that it works that way, just open up the page, look at it, stare at it, hoping it jumps up and somehow comes into their head. Surprise, surprise, it doesn't really work. But we are in a position, thanks to some research, this is a wonderful paper, now about 12 years old, by John Dunlopsky, which basically pulled together a lot of the research on revision and the methods that can be used. And these are the methods that he addressed in this paper. You'll recognize many of these methods. Here they are. Now, that list of methods, according to his research, some of them are more effective than others. Another mantra that I'll use a lot with my classes is not every revision strategy is created equally. Some are more effective than others. So we're not going to put anybody on the spot here. So this is just a quiz for you in the privacy of wherever you're joining us tonight. But what would you think would be the most effective and the least effective in that list? Okay, this is what the research suggests. The least effective, rereading and highlighting. And mnemonics. Now, mnemonics have their place. Part of the problem is that if you have too many mnemonics, you almost need a mnemonic to remember your mnemonics. But the key ones to focus in on there is highlighting and rereading. Guess what? They tend to be some of the most popular activities. Out come the highlighters, out come the rereading. They tend to be.
Yeah.
Those are some of the other methods that are kind of in the middle, but the two that come out at the top in the research are very clear: self-quizzing and spaced out study. So anything that's in green there is worthwhile doing, but the ones that we really want to focus on tonight are the most effective ones to demonstrate to you and show you how you can support your working. Now, as I said earlier on, we would love the graph to look like this, that the most effective strategies are used strategies. The reality is actually totally the opposite. Sorry, there's somebody who's got themselves off mute, just to let you know. I don't want you to be saying something that I regret. So just check for me, would you, that you're all muted there so that there's nothing coming through. So the most effective strategies tend to be the least effective strategies that are used. So rereading tends to be very popular, even though it's less effective. But what we want to show you is how you secure the success, how you demonstrate to your young people that this works through the use of spaced retrieval. Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. What do we mean by spaced retrieval. So retrieval practice is a learning strategy that involves actively recalling information from memory rather than simply passively reviewing it. Active recall rather than passive review. So it's engaging in the active recall helps learners to strengthen their knowledge connections. And I mentioned earlier the importance of connections in learning. It improves their ability to retrieve that information. It becomes more and more automatic, so they're not having to do this in the exam. Oh, what was that? What was that? What was that? It's just there. And it helps them then because they're able to make those connections and retrieve it just like that. They can apply their knowledge. They're taking their knowledge and applying it to some of the more challenging exam questions that will come up. And the theory behind it is kind of like this, that whenever we're learning something new, there are physical changes that take place in our brain, the synapses that form, but our brain is ruthless at pruning those. Any information that it thinks is not really relevant or necessary and important, it tends to get rid of really quickly. So the active retrieval is all about strengthening those connections. It's about kind of saying to our brain, that thing that you're about to forget, just hold on a second, because I kind of need to remember that. Don't forget it just yet. And how we do that is through this constant retrieval, this constantly going back and not just reading it, but thinking, no, what was that? What was that? Well, oh, yes, that's what it was. And if I use an analogy here, it's kind of like, right, that thing that we studied a month ago, it's kind of somewhere there in the undergrowth. There's a vague path towards it, but I'm going to have to work hard to get through that path, to get to that thing that I need. Bring it back now. Whereas if we're traveling down these roads, they become more traveled. The pathway becomes easier and easier for us to find. We can zip down there, get it quickly, retrieve it, and use it. So the idea that practicing retrieving strengthens those connections and helps us to recall. And therefore, and this is absolutely key, it does require effort. Right? It does absolutely require effort, but the right kind of effort can produce surprisingly effective results. So it's about saying to our young people, look, if you're going to be revising anyway, why not use some of these methods that are more effective? Because the more effective methods are going to produce the kinds of results that you need. So again, this is available on the website, folks, for you to go and have a look at afterwards. It gives you a little bit more detail there of what I've just gone over, should you want to have a bit of a read of it, why this is so important that we retrieve, because the brain tries to clear that out. But then the second element is the time, the spaced retrieval. It's about taking the same amount of time and spreading it out over a longer time period. So in this model here, we're cramming everything at the end before the assessment. In this model, we're taking the same amount of time and spacing it out. And that spacing effect is crucial to the retrieval as well, because it turns out that the best time to do retrieval is just at the point where you're beginning to forget it. Because if it is too easy for you, if retrieval is immediately after you've looked at it, you don't have to make much effort. And remember that maxim, if you're not thinking, you're probably not learning. So this is where the revision planning that Mr. McCallum's just showed you can really lean into this spaced retrieval effect, taking the same amount of time but spacing it out. And as he said 2 years ago, the last time we did this, all of that had to be done manually. We now have the power of AI to help us and to help you to help your own children to do this, to space this out. So it's not more time, it's just more effective time. Now, one thing I've certainly found over the last number of years is we've been really highlighting this in the school. Knowledge is not enough on its own. You need to know this, but remember what I said at the start, it's success that breeds motivation. So this is where we need to use these principles to start to help our young people to experience that success. So how do we go about doing this? This is one way that I do with sixth formers in my geography classes. These are the topics that we're covering up the top of the different weeks. And as they go through, they're doing this RAG analysis that Mr. McCallum's already talked about, which helps them to focus in on the things that they need to be focusing on that week in the spaced retrieval. And then this is the spaced retrieval booklets that they do. I'm going to show you AI in a moment. I'm a huge fan of technology. It has tremendous potential. I'm also a huge fan of books, of jotting these things down, of just trying to get this information down and letting them have that opportunity to get that success and to demonstrate just how much they know. So how do we do spaced retrieval? There's various ways you can do so. Blank page retrieval, where you start with the blank page itself and see how much you can remember. That can sometimes be a little bit challenging, however, if the young people don't know really anything much about the topic. It's something that can be really effective further on down in the revision as they're starting to get this into their head. Self-quizzing is another really good way where they're asking themselves questions. Rather than sitting reading the content, they'll ask themselves questions about it. Again, I'll show you in a moment how AI can help with that. Flashcards are a brilliant way of using that technique of self-quizzing. There are many ways or many places you can go and get the physical copies of those flashcards, and maybe that's something that your child would like to do. If you're going to do so, can I point you at the right-hand side here towards the Lightner system for gaining the most from the potential of flashcards? Basically, it's saying as you start with your pile of flashcards there, if you remember it easily, put it on the left. If you remember it with effort, take a little bit of time. And that's another thing that's important about this spaced retrieval. It's not necessarily about the answer coming immediately. Take that time. Oh, what was that? We've all had that moment, haven't we? Whenever something's in the tip of our tongue. Oh, I know that person. What was their name? What was that actor? Oh, do you know that moment? That's where spaced retrieval is really effective. So if they're struggling a little bit, but get there eventually, that goes in the middle. If they really, really struggle and don't get it, goes on the right. And then you're able to select from those piles in different ways. So the one on the left where you got it immediately, you don't need to revisit that much. The one on the right where you really struggled, you need to revisit more. So it's a really powerful way of using those flashcards to help with that. This is an example from our GCSE geography books that our students use. And a few years ago now, we built in those retrieval practice questions as part of those flashcards into the notes. I designed this purposely because at that time I was parenting one of my own children through school, and I thought, wouldn't it be really good for me as a parent if I had the questions right down there? And for any of you who are parents of GCSE geography students, you can go into their books and there's the questions to ask them. But if they're working alone, they can cover up the main content of the page and ask themselves those questions. Just take those few moments to ask the question and that effort of trying to recall. And if they're completely stuck, they can have a quick glance. Ah, yes, that's roughly what that was. Cover it up and have another go. Another way of doing this is through retrieval mats. These are slightly less intimidating than the absolute blank page retrieval, where there's the structures laid out for them and there's the starting point. I'm a great believer in giving them the first letter of the things they're trying to recall, because often that can be the prompt that they need, and these retrieval mats can really help whenever they do that. Okay, I'm going to finish off my little section by talking to you about how technology can help whenever it comes to revision. The one that I'm going to be referring to here is Google Gemini, because that's Gemini that I've got set up to help me, already jumping in a little bit too soon. A little bit more of that in a moment. Google Gemini is the one that we're using mostly in school, although ChatGPT and other AI tools will be useful and helpful for this as well. But just let me show you something about Google Gemini and how it works. Now, the danger in this is that we need to absolutely avoid is the students becoming passive. This is where AI can do your thinking for you, and it ends up becoming about short-term performance rather than long-term learning. But rest assured that whenever we are talking to our pupils in school about this, we are very, very frank and honest with them about this, and we warn them about the dangers that there will be in overuse of AI, over-reliance on AI, of using AI without thinking. But our audience tonight, obviously, is yourselves, the parents and guardians of these young people. So I'll say this to you: you will know your child's or children very, very well. You will know whether showing them this kind of thing they will be able to go and use this properly unsupervised, or whether you'll need to keep a really close eye on them when they're doing it and just check and make sure that that effort is still going in there. But this isn't a fully fledged webinar on how to use AI, but I'm sure all of you know I've had some experience of just typing in the prompt there. Mr. McCallum's already shown that. What I want to show you here, though, with Gemini and ChatGPT is something similar, or some of the different tools that we've got here. We've got a guided learning tool. So the idea behind guided learning is that rather than giving the answers, it's going to ask questions. And that's where the potential really lies. I can also add in some files. So if you want to support your child in photographing their notes and putting them in as a source, so it's asking questions based on the notes, you can do so. So I'll just ask a simple one like this. I am a GCSE pupil revising river flooding. I want to learn about the human causes of flooding. And then we'll just press enter and you'll see the kind of thing that comes up with this. Okay, let's explore this. I'll ask some questions. Two of the biggest causes here, and it gives a little bit of background. Now, if that's a little bit too much writing, you can put in your prompt to keep the writing very, very short and focused. But here we go. Here are the questions. Which of the following topics? So let me just select this one here. I'll just copy and paste this in. And hopefully after this, it should start asking me some questions. Okay, there we go. So I'm just looking for the question in here. Right, there we go. So down towards the bottom is the question that it's beginning to ask me. And I can start to have this dialogue with the AI where I write what I think is the answer, and it's going to give me some feedback on that. Now, I think the writing there is a little bit too long, so I would put in as the prompt to keep the responses quite short and focused. So that's just your general AI. But there's one particular very, very powerful tool that is part of Google's AI suite called Notebook LM. And this is a little bit of an idea of the incredible power and potential that lies behind this. One of the things I really like about Notebook LM is the fact that it's this kind of self-contained, everything that you need about a topic is in the same place. I can go over in the left here and add sources. So similarly to what I did with Google Gemini, if you want to photograph a section of your young person's book or notes or something like that and put it into Notebook LM, what it's then doing is not just drawing stuff randomly, including stuff that may not be relevant to the CA course or stuff that is not at GCSE level, maybe at A level, that kind of thing. This is saying, no, this is the content we want you to use. This is the content that the teachers are teaching. And that's keeping everything within those guardrails, keeping it nice and safe. In the middle, you've got your chats, which is kind of like your typical AI interface, but it's the stuff over here in the studio, which is really very, very powerful indeed, because I want you to see the kinds of things that can be generated from this. You can generate audio overviews, video overviews, all sorts of things like this. So if I click on one of these, I have produced these earlier because it sometimes takes a little bit of time to produce. Here is an infographic, a summary infographic. Now, what I can do with this is to tell it to add more or less content onto this. And this is the kind of thing that if I'm adding a slightly less content, this is a brilliant prompt for that spaced retrieval. So remember, I talked about having the retrieval mats. You might be sitting there thinking, that's great, but how am I going to make the retrieval mats? This might be one of the ways that you'll make those retrieval mats, something like that. And I'll show you whenever you're generating these, go to this infographic and you click on that little pencil there, you can see that you have a little bit of opportunity here to steer it in the direction you want to do. So the one that I just showed you was a detailed one. You have a standard one, it's going to have less writing on it, and it's going to help you to then generate that retrieval mat. Right, the other thing that we've got down here, let me see if I can find this, there's the quiz. So what about those flashcards? Again, you might be saying, well, flashcards are the quizzes, that would be a really good thing to do, but how am I going to generate these questions? This generates the questions for you. and it allows you to have a go at answering those. And if you need a hint, there's a little bit of a hint in there. This is certainly one of the things that I found when I was revising subjects that were not geography, particularly chemistry. Chemistry is my nemesis, dark arts. I still don't really understand it to this day. And I was sitting trying to help my own children to revise science without really understanding chemistry. And I didn't know what questions to ask. You might be thinking, well, I would love to help, but I'm not an expert in these subjects. What questions can I ask? Well, there you go. Are these the relevant questions? Well, yes, because we've put in our own content. You're drawing from the content we're giving our pupils, and you can be confident in those that they're generating the right kind of thing. Down here then is the flashcards. Similar kind of thing. These are generated from this. And there we go. It's exactly the kind of spaced retrieval of taking those few moments to try and have a go on the answer, and then you can check your answer against that kind of thing. But a couple of really cool things that I want to show you that are kind of unique to this. One of them is this mind map from it. Now, all the research in spider diagram says that the best way to use the spider diagram is to generate it, because it's the generating it and makes you think about it. But they can be quite time consuming, and sometimes they can end up being a little bit disorganized. And where's the structure within them? So because this is digital, would you see the way that you can use this for spaced retrieval? Right. What are the three main subsections to this case study? Right. Okay. What are the causes of flooding? Now, you could imagine using this with your own child, and you're getting those questions and asking them if they can name the main subsections. It's helping them to see and understand the structure, or indeed they can be using this themselves. Again, I said earlier, you will know your young person very well. Are they the kind of person where you can show them this and they will use it responsibly? Or are they the kind of person that you show them this and you might need just to keep a wee bit of an eye on them? You'll know your child, so use it accordingly. And all of this wonderful information sits in here. And if you need to go and find out a little bit more, and again, this can be used in place of those retrieval mats. Right, so they've now done a little bit of a say everything you can remember about this. If you click on this, it takes you into this little chat window where if they're not too sure, they can have another go at trying to get that into their heads. It's very, very powerful. Then there is a video which can be produced for this summary video. I quite like this as a primer before I go into the case study. Watch the video. And again, it's drawing it from the actual content that's there. And if there are any images in that content, very often draw that into the video itself. Again, whenever you're generating this video, you have a little bit of scope now, and this is literally just dropped within the last couple of days for you to have a fuller explainer or a really brief bite-sized. If you're the parent of a neurodivergent young person here, somebody with dyslexia or with ADHD who really just struggles to sit at the desk for a long period of time, or somebody with dyslexia who struggles with the sheer volume of the amount of reading they've got to do, I absolutely believe this stuff is transformative, folks, because what you're doing now is giving your young person the opportunity to learn in a way that removes some of those frictions they experience because they're neurodiversity. And the final one to show you here is this one on the podcast. Many of you will be aware of this. And again, it's drawing this information from the actual source itself. But what you may not know is that there's a version of this called interactive, and I want to demonstrate this to you. Hi, I've just got a question I'd like to ask about this and the flood. Is it physical causes or is it human causes? I'm not really sure. It's almost like you can phone into the podcast. It really is absolutely incredible. And again, I'm thinking it's going to be useful for everybody, but particularly if you're got a young person that kind of really struggles with just being in the same place all the time with just nothing but text in front of them. And again, and this is literally just dropped within the last couple of days, there are different formats for this one. The deep dives can maybe be up to 10 minutes long. This brief overview before they sit down to revise, they can have a listen to a podcast that gets their mind thinking along the right way, that helps them to really get to grips with the revision that they're going to be doing. So effort is key. Success is key, because success brings motivation. Spaced retrieval is the core of what you really want to be focusing on. Paper is really important. AI has incredible potential. There are some dangers here, but I'm hoping what you're seeing here is some of that potential of how you can work with your child, your young person, to help them to get that success, to narrate that success, because it's that success that you're having along with the success they're having in school that's going to bring the motivation to help them to keep focusing on the way through. I'll hand over now to Mrs. Hannah.
Good evening, folks. I hope you can hear me okay. I am just going to talk to you for a little minute or two about looking after the emotional health and well-being of our young people throughout their exams. My name is Sarah Hannah, for those of you who I haven't met before, and I am the Pastoral VP here. And I suppose what we're talking about this evening from this perspective is developing calm and confident young people in school, but also helping them to develop their resilience. And I suppose the thing we really need to address, first of all, is the elephant in the room, which is that exams are challenging, they are hard, and that's the normal for our young people. And you can see on the screen some of the feelings that young people have expressed during exam period, feeling overwhelmed, dominated by thoughts of anxiety. It's a short period, but it's all consuming, a weight on my shoulders. And I think the pastoral team in school would all agree that that is something that we witness as well. We are very busy in the period running up to exams because young people are struggling with their emotional health and well-being. And the thing that we are trying really hard to support them with is the fact that these feelings are actually quite normal. We do all feel this way when we're under pressure. And the important thing for us as parents and as staff in school is to help our young people to try and overcome those feelings and give them tools to cope with them. So in terms of being overwhelmed and feeling stressed and feeling anxious, what does it look like? Now you can see again on the screen here, there are various different symptoms and everyone will react differently. You and I will all react differently. My children will behave differently to how your children will behave. So it may be things like changes in appetite, not eating or binge eating, not sleeping or sleeping too much. In our house, it's irritability, it's slamming doors, it's tears, sometimes mine, because it is really challenging as a parent to navigate your way through that. But for young people, this is what it's looking like. They're struggling maybe to cope. Saying they're feeling stuck is another example. And I suppose there is science behind this. When we're feeling overwhelmed, our brains literally become hijacked. And that's when we go into fight, flight, freeze, flop mode. And young people are experiencing that quite frequently. So what we're trying to do is to help them overcome that, because when their brains are hijacked like this, they can't learn. They can't take any more in. So we need to help find strategies to get back online so that we can learn and we can revise and not feel overwhelmed. So I'm going to take you through a few of those strategies this evening that I have found helpful as a parent, and also that we have used in school here. Now, the last time we did this webinar, I talked about the Take 5 Steps to Wellbeing, and we still talk about that a lot in school. We have a huge focus on emotional health and wellbeing, as you will know from completing the survey last year for Being Well, Doing Well. So the pupils are really familiar with all of this language. We've talked about it recently in school, actually, because 2 weeks ago it was National Self-Care Week, and I spoke to 2 year groups in PD about how we exhibit self-care. But as parents, sometimes we need to step in, because if young people are overwhelmed, it's harder for them to look after themselves. So I suppose the first thing is back to basics, supporting our physical well-being, with the 3 things you can see on the screen there: sleep, diet, and physical activity. Now, the recommendation for teenagers for sleep is 8 to 10 hours a night. And I know from speaking to lots of the young people here in school that that isn't happening all of the time. It is hard. There's a lot going on in life. But that's the recommendation. If we can aim for that as much as possible, it definitely helps, because it boosts our mood. It helps us to feel better and recharge during the night. Diet, you'll all know this, is important. Balanced diet, and sometimes when we're not looking after ourselves, that slips a bit. For me, that's definitely the first thing to slip. So just making sure and taking control of what our children are eating, and physical activity. It is so important to try and keep active, because again, it's boosting those hormones in the body that are going to help us to feel that we're in control of things. With regard to emotional well-being, I'm going to take you through a few different techniques here. You can see on the screen that we would use in school with pupils, and you can ask them about this at home and ask them, are they familiar with some of this language? Hopefully they are, and our staff will be too, in terms of giving the brain a break. Breaks are really important, and you know, young people maybe think, I need to spend ages doing this revision, but we know the science doesn't support that. We need to have a break in the revision periods, as Mr. McCallum and Mr. Hamill have spoken to you about this evening. And we need in that schedule to have rest days and downtime, to avoid burnout. And that's one of the reasons we're actually having this webinar now, to give our pupils a chance to study for the next few weeks and then have a break at Christmas, have a proper break. And I'll give you an example. I was speaking to a pupil this afternoon who was going out to games, and she was going out to the walking group. And I said to her, I would love to be going out for a walk. I have so much to do and I don't even know where to start. And she said, well, why don't you come out for a walk? And I thought, well, I better, practice what I preach. And I did. Walked outside for 10 minutes with the Year 11 Games group and came back and was much more productive. So I can say that science truly does work. It worked for me this afternoon. Socializing is so important. We need to connect. It helps us to feel better. And for young people, it's vital. It can be online. It can be communicating to each other online, but better face-to-face. I'll talk about the online stuff in a wee minute and you'll sort of get how I feel about it. But if they can be out with their friends some of the time, it is really good, and not stopping those activities that they enjoy. That will definitely help with emotional health and well-being. Praising effort and hard work, not outcomes. And I suppose that's something that we are really clear on in school. I'm proud of your effort, not just what you got in your exam. We say to pupils all the time, you compare you with you, as long as you try your best. And our teenagers in school hear pressure. You will know this as their parents. So if they can hear reassurance and encouragement and positivity, it will definitely make an impact. My experience revising as a teenager all those years ago was, if you don't revise, this will be the outcome. And that isn't always the best approach. Sometimes it can be, sometimes it's not harmful to have that wee bit of an incentive, but just being positive with it as well. This is, I suppose, a challenging one. Be involved, but not too much. So we need to allow our young people to develop their own skills and learning, and to be motivated. But we don't want to put too much pressure on them at the same time. So for me, how being involved looks as a parent is homework is done in the kitchen. Now, that's easier for me. My children are younger. They're not quite at the teenage stage yet. And I have no doubt there will be battles along the line about where work is done. But just being part of their learning, even in the car, going over bits and pieces of revision, so that they know you're taking an interest, they know you're there with them, they know that you have their back if things aren't maybe going well, and just being able to remind them that mistakes happen and it's part of learning and it's nothing for us to get too overly worried about. Monitoring screen time is the next thing I have on the board now. Again, this is a battle in my house. Screens have their place. You've just listened to a whole session about the importance of AI and how we can use technology to support our learning. But too much of it, too much of anything isn't necessarily a good thing. You can see I've put a couple of infographics on the screen there, and I want to talk to you about both of them in terms of screens. At bedtime, we know, you'll have heard this in the press, blue light has an impact on our sleep. And it's really interesting there. It's maybe difficult for you to see the actual statistics. I'm not sure if you can or not. But if you use electronic devices before bedtime, if young people use them, they are 200% more likely to be sleepy during the day. That's staggering, that statistic. And I know this is really challenging. We have our phones in our bedrooms. I do too. But it's having the discipline to maybe put it to the side. And I spoke to pupils last week about having a digital pause. This was one of the self-care things I recommended. See how you feel if you leave your phone downstairs for an evening. Don't take it to bed with you. And see if it has an impact on your sleep and how you feel going to sleep and the next day, as an experiment. And it's maybe worth having that conversation and just seeing if that's something that's worth trying. The next infographic is with regard to sleep and social media and mental health. Now, I didn't pick this just for girls. It shows girls and boys, but you can see the impact that social media is having, the negative impact on our young people. So it's, I suppose, with regard to social media, it plays on their mind. They're reading things in bed that are going to impact their ability to sleep, make them feel a certain way. And I see this day and daily, and I suppose that's why I'm maybe going on a wee bit about this particular aspect of looking after ourselves, because our young people maybe don't have total control over what they're seeing online. And I know you as parents will be monitoring all of that, but it's something that comes into school and we see a lot of as a pastoral team. So it's just trying to encourage them to have those wee digital breaks, because it is definitely healthy for them to get a break from the phones. Encouraging relaxation techniques is something else that we have been doing in school and talking about in school. Doing things like breathing exercises, grounding exercises, journaling, or just writing down what's going on for you to get it out of your head. And I've put on the screen 2 really good apps that you could use. I have both of them on my phone, Headspace and Calm. And they just make you focus on something else, empty your brain, forget about what's overwhelming you, and get you back online again. So I would recommend having a look at those apps, because I think they're fabulous. I have used them myself. And just trying to manage what you can manage. Spoke to pupils about this last week as well. Set small, daily achievable goals. Focus on the things you know you're going to achieve first, and then hit the bigger things. And those little getting over those little challenges can make a difference. And keep them at your hobbies. Don't give up your hobbies because you're doing exams. It's good for you to get a break and continue with your hobbies. Take time to talk. Now, again, I know as a parent that this is challenging because our life is manic. You're in the house, you're out of the house, you're a taxi driver, running everybody to clubs and all over the country, trying to get the dinners and the lunches organised, and it's hard to get the time to do that. But I suppose I spoke in the last webinar about in the car, so that's where I find the time to have those chats, and they actually are easy conversations when we're in the car together. And sometimes I hear the feet coming across the landing at night, and somebody coming in to have a chat with me late at night. And that is actually really good for our young people. They've processed what's happened during the day, and at night they're offloading that before they go to sleep. And again, there's science behind this. It's what we would call containment. So when our cup is full, we need the opportunity to offload it and to feel contained. And as parents, the hardest part for us with containment is to listen without offering advice. Sometimes that's all we need, just to be heard, and not to actually be able to provide solutions. Just let them get it off their chests and validate their feelings. You know, it makes sense that you feel stressed. This is a big year. Just let them know it's okay to feel this way, and you are there for them, as we try to be in school. And finally, just folks, be positive. I've sort of touched on that a bit throughout what I've been saying here, but just keeping them going. You're doing really well. I know you can do this. We're going to get through it together. And, you know, that does make all the difference, that positive language. Just before you go, I want to touch on something which is really important. Sometimes we can't manage on our own. And that is something I do want to make clear to you this evening. If you feel that your child is not coping, if you think that this is all becoming too much for them, please let us know. Lift the phone or send an email, and we will get on board with supporting them. That's been happening a bit in school recently anyway. I think it's as exams approach. There has been a bit of work going on with some of our young people. And you can see on the screen the different support that we have. Links counselling, reach mentoring. We can organise that for you in school, but also the Here to Help app is fantastic. You can get it on your phone and it will signpost. And also just to keep in mind those 5 steps to wellbeing. And if you think they're not working, if your child is totally overwhelmed that they can't function, please let us know, because we do want to support them. That is all from me this evening, folks. I'd just like to finish up by saying that if any of you have any further questions or anything you'd like to talk to either Mr. McCallum, Mr. Hamill or myself about, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And thank you for coming along and listening to us. It's as well, it was online tonight. We didn't have to go out in that horrible rain. Hopefully it was a bit more pleasant in the comfort of your own homes. So thank you folks very much, and we'll hopefully see you all soon.
Thank you, folks. So thanks for all the comments that were coming through there. As Mrs. Hannah said, please just keep asking the questions. We can hang about here for a few more minutes. I've just popped in a very short feedback. We would love to get your feedback so that we can shape this moving forward. So I see a hand is up. So let me just see if we can find out where that's gone. Sorry, I've lost that. It's just gone there from whoever asked the question. If you either want to unmute your mic or you could pop the question into the chat. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, some frazzled parents. Yeah. Yeah, all 3 of us in the call. That's a hat that we all wear quite a lot. So yeah. Okay, folks, now I'm not seeing any more questions coming through, so we are hanging about if there are any. So all the links were put into the chat. The main one is on the website, and I shared those with you, folks, so if there are any things that you want to be looking at. We've recorded this session, so it'll take a day or 2 for us just to edit that, and it'll go on to the website. Again, I'll just pop into the chat the place on the website, so you'll find it. I hope it's in the obvious place, supporting learning at home, but that's where you'll find it within the next day or 2. And thanks for all those messages coming in. Genuinely, you're very, very welcome. It is truly a partnership, and this works best whenever the partnership is there. So again, can we just thank you all for taking the time to come along tonight?
Yes, folks, I can't get Mrs. Hannah out of my chair. That's probably a sign for good. But for those who are still here, thank you so much for joining us. And a big thanks to me, to Mr. Hamill and to Mrs. Hannah for giving up their evening. We look forward to keeping in touch. Take care. I'll just end the call.